Good afternoon. I'm here with Vicki Cabot at the JCC on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in Phoenix, Arizona, actually Scottsdale, Arizona.
Absolutely.
And we are doing an oral history, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Mrs. Cabot and meeting you for the first time,
Nice
which is
to be
very
here.
Exciting.
Actually, it's a nice way to meet.
It is.
You get to learn a lot about me, right?
A lot about you.
That's it.
So tell me, I understand you're from the East Coast.
Right. I was born in the Bronx.
Born
grew up
in
New Jersey.
Bronx. Okay. And educated in the East?
State University of New Jersey, Rutgers University, Douglas College.
Definitely an Easterner. And your husband?
My husband went to Rutgers as well.
Oh,
and Rutgers Law School as well.
Is that where you met?
We did. We met at a mixer in my dorm. Sophomore year.
Oh, see, it pays to go to the mixers. So what prompted the move to Arizona?
We were living in southern New Jersey in a suburb called Cherry Hill outside of Philadelphia. My husband was practicing with a large law firm which large for that time. It was 250 lawyers. Now we have mega firms, but at that time it was a large firm. And I think he's a litigator, and he was really looking for opportunities to really get him into court, and felt like moving up the chairs where he was going to take him a while to get there. And he had a chance meeting with Jack Brown, of blessed memory, who had started a firm here and was doing some interesting work, and enticed him to think about coming to Phoenix. So that's kind of how we came. I have to say that I'd never been the furthest west I had been up until that point was Indianapolis. Had not a clue where Phoenix was, not a clue where Arizona was. Had to pull out the atlas to look to see where it was on the map. But it was maybe it was just the right time, and we just said, we'll check it out and see, and if it doesn't work, we'll come home.
And you come from what we call a mixed heritage.
Yeah, my parents, it was the mixed marriage. My parents, they told it. Absolutely, yes. My father's family was Ashkenazic, my mother's family was Sephardic, and they were married, if I remember correctly, in 1943. And at that particular time, really, the Jews in the Ashkenazic community married Jews in the Ashkenazic community.
That's right.
Jews in the Sephardic community married Jews in the Sephardic community. So,
did you speak some Spanish?
It's an interesting question. When I lived the first 5 years, we lived in the Bronx in an apartment on the first floor, and my grandma lived on the third floor, and she was widowed. And she spoke Ladino, which is the ancient Spanish. And my mother, in fact, was the oldest of 6, didn't learn to speak English until she went to first grade in the New York public schools. So anyway, my grandma, my mom always spoke in Ladino. So we grew up with it there. We didn't speak it at home because my father didn't speak. So it was one of these things, it was different. But interestingly, I have 3 sisters, and my oldest sister and I both were Spanish majors in college, and both were Spanish teachers.
Interesting.
So I think we had that connection.
Carried on that heritage.
Absolutely.
And you have 4 children,
I do.
all born before you moved to Arizona.
Yes.
And I wonder if you named them in the Sephardic tradition or the Ashkenazi tradition.
That's an interesting question. No, we named them in the Ashkenazic tradition, and they were all named after relatives who had passed away. And
so they came here. The younger ones were put into preschool.
Then when we moved here, the kids ranged from 10 to 2. So we had 2 that were in public school and 2 that were enrolled at the JCC. Which was then at 15th in Maryland. One was we went to Moms and Tots, the little one, and my 3rd daughter was in the pre-kindergarten class.
How did you find breaking into the Jewish community, becoming part of the community?
I'm probably one of the biggest fans of this Jewish community for that reason. We came here not really realizing what we were leaving behind in terms of family and connections and the familiarity of growing up and living in basically the same in the Northeast. I didn't know anybody here at all, other than a couple of the lawyers that we had met, through when my husband was out here interviewing and whatnot. And this community was so warm and so welcoming, and all you had to do was say yes, and all you had to do was accept an invitation to go to a meeting, and the next thing you knew, your phone was ringing and people were asking you to do this or that or whatever, and before you know it, if you want to be, you could be involved in everything. I mean, it was very open too, because it was growing.
So much of our community at that time was transplanted people, so they'd all been where you were.
Exactly. So everyone understood really what you were feeling when you were new here. Absolutely.
So early on, you went to work for the Jewish News.
I started at the Jewish News probably, in the early 1980s, not too much after. Like once we settled in, got the kids settled. My youngest one got into public school, and I had gone back to school at ASU to the Cronkite School because I decided that I'd always really wanted to write. I was a teacher, and I thought, why not? I'm in a new place, because sometimes being in a new place opens you up that way too.
That's right.
So I started actually at the Jewish News as an intern through ASU.
Oh, how
and then stayed there from then on in different capacities over the years.
Right, and I remember reading you frequently in those years, and very happily. And then you became interested in other areas of our community, and you became board activated, shall we say?
I was always active in that. I think I think sometimes I wonder if it's who asks you first, or whether there's just sort of a natural convergence in terms of your interests and the people that are involved in any particular organization. But my main area of communal involvement was through the Jewish Federation and its agencies. And I'd say I started off at the very beginning in the women's department in the Federation, and went through the leadership there, and then I moved over to what they call the general campaign, and ultimately chaired the campaign with my husband, who also was Federation president a few years ago, and served on a number of different agency boards, Hillel, Kibble, whatever. But I've been involved in a lot of different capacities, and I think it's made my life here much fuller and much richer.
Yes. And in those positions, you were naturally open to the shifting demographics of the city. When you and I moved approximately 10 years before you, I think there were 5 or 6 temples spread out. Beth Israel talked about buying land in the north, and people went to church.
Right.
And Bethel, I think, went through the same experience.
Exactly.
So talk about your involvement in that and your views of how that went.
Well, when we first came here, we were told to move into the North Central Corridor because we were told that that's where whatever density there was Jewishly was. And it was just beginning to change, I think, when we came in, just beginning to move a little further east. But through my communal involvement and also through my involvement at the newspaper, I really sort of had a front row seat watching what happened. I believe it was, well, first at Bethel, there was the whole discussion about whether to build what became the Shurkin Center, which was an addition to the building, and whether or not we should be thinking about waiting and building a satellite facility out in Paradise Valley or that area, because the population was beginning to move, and ultimately Bethel stayed in Central Phoenix and put the addition on the building. Temple Beth Israel, I covered that for the newspaper, which was quite interesting in the sense that I've never been to meetings like that where there was such emotion, and I still remember it to this day, of people and both sides, you could understand where both sides were coming from. The younger families that had moved further out and were looking to be serviced closer to their homes, and an older population that this was their temple, this was their home, and they really wanted to preserve the center of their Jewish life there. The JCC, the same thing happened after Beth Israel, and ultimately moved, and we're now sitting in the new home out in Scottsdale, which really is now the center of the Jewish community here. But it's been interesting to watch that shift.
Yes.
There still is, I think, a population in Central Phoenix that's remained there and will always be there. But if I had children moving to Arizona now and married with kids, I tell them to move close to the campus.
I've been very honored to have met you and interviewed you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're an excellent interviewer. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.